Located in the middle of America's Southwest desert stands a monumental product of human ingenuity and accomplishment, a vessel of life-giving water and a structure of awe-inspiring size. Now, Hoover Dam on Modern Marvels.
On the morning of March 3rd, 2026, at 6:47 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, a maintenance crew conducting routine inspections along the downstream face of Hoover Dam stopped dead in their tracks. Their equipment logs froze. The crew supervisor grabbed his radio and called back to the Bureau of Reclamation field office in Boulder City, Nevada, and the number he read out loud made the dispatcher on the other end go completely silent. The bathtub ring, 140 feet above the current water surface. 140 feet. That's the height of a 14-story building, now standing as nothing but empty air above a lake that was supposed to last forever. And the footage captured by visitors near the Hoover Dam overlook that same morning confirmed every single word of that radio call. This is not a rumor. This is not a projection. This is not a model. This is concrete. This is geology. And geology does not lie. So here's the question you need to sit with right now. If you knew the water supply for 40 million Americans was visibly, measurably, undeniably disappearing, would you want to know how close we actually are to the edge? Because that's exactly what we're going to show you today. And by the end of this video, you will never look at a glass of water the same way again. What that white scar actually means. Most people who see images of Lake Mead think the bathtub ring is just an ugly stain, a visual blemish on an otherwise impressive landmark. They're wrong. That white calcium carbonate crust coating the canyon walls is one of the most brutally honest measurement systems on the planet. It cannot be revised. It doesn't respond to political pressure. It doesn't care about drought management optimism or federal reassurance. Every single foot of that white mineral crust represents water that entered Lake Mead, raised the surface to that elevation, and never came back. Dr. Patricia Helms, a hydrologist at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, who has monitored Lake Mead for 19 years, watched the footage circulating from Hoover Dam and described what she saw in a single devastating phrase. "We are watching the structural failure of a water system built for a climate that no longer exists." Let that land for a moment. Because here is what 140 feet means in numbers you can actually feel. Lake Mead at full capacity holds approximately 26.1 million acre-feet of water. 1 acre-foot alone is enough to cover an entire acre of land 1 foot deep, roughly 326,000 gallons. At the elevation recorded on March 3rd, 2026, Lake Mead holds approximately 23% of its total design capacity. 23%. This is not a lake running low. This is a lake in free fall, and the white scar climbing higher on those canyon walls every single month is the receipt. How a lake dies. The science. Nobody wants to explain to understand why this is happening. You have to understand one critical fact about the Colorado River that most people were never taught. The Colorado River is not fed by groundwater. It is not replenished by underground aquifers. There is no hidden reservoir sitting beneath the desert floor quietly refilling it at night. The Colorado River runs almost entirely on snowpack. Specifically, the snowpack that builds up each winter across the Rocky Mountains of Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and northern New Mexico, then melts slowly through spring and early summer, sending water downstream into the river system that eventually fills Lake Mead. That snowpack system is collapsing. Dr. Jonathan Reeves, a climate hydrologist at the Colorado State University Water Center, spent years analyzing snowpack accumulation data across the upper Colorado River Basin from 1950 through 2025. His findings, published in January 2026, describe a trend that has now crossed into what scientists are calling irreversible territory within the modeled timeframe. Average snowpack in the upper Colorado River basin has declined by 31% since 1980. Annual peak snowpack, the number that determines how much meltwater flows downstream each spring, has dropped by 19% in just the last 12 years. But here is the part that has water scientists in a near-panic state, and the part that almost never makes the news. It's not just that less snow is falling. The timing has shifted. Warmer winter temperatures are causing snowpack to melt weeks earlier than historical averages. That earlier melt arrives before the river system's storage infrastructure is positioned to capture it. Water that was once held in frozen suspension across mountain elevations above 8,000 feet now runs off rapidly, evaporates at accelerated rates, and simply fails to translate into reservoir storage the way it did for the first half of the 20th century. And now the number that should make every single one of you stop scrolling and actually pay attention. The Colorado River Compact of 1922 legally allocated 16 million acre-feet of water annually between 7 basin states. The actual average annual flow of the Colorado River since the year 2000 has been approximately 12.3 million acre-feet, 4 million acre-feet of overallocation. Every single year, year after year after year. The math only runs in one direction, downstream, toward an empty lake. 40 million people, zero backup plan. Let's put real faces on this number. In Las Vegas, Nevada, where 90% of the municipal water supply comes directly from Lake Mead, the Southern Nevada Water Authority has spent over $3 billion since 2000 on infrastructure designed to access water at progressively lower lake elevations. They drilled new intake tunnels. They built low lake pumping facilities. They launched the most aggressive water conservation program of any major American city, and the lake still dropped 140 feet. In the Coachella Valley of California, farmers like Maria Gutierrez, who has worked 40 acres for over 2 decades on water rights signed in the 1960s, received 60% of her allocated water in 2024. In 2025, that number fell to 51%. Her crop yields track those cuts directly. Her mortgage does not. On the Navajo Nation, where 40% of residents still lack running water in their homes, the communities relying on hauled water and community collection points are watching the same overtaxed aquifer system beneath the Colorado River Basin shrink year by year. There is no alternative infrastructure waiting in reserve. There is no backup system. There is nothing. And in Phoenix, Arizona, a metropolitan area of 6 million people projecting 1.2 million additional residents through 2040, city planners are running emergency scenario models right now. Models asking a question that no major American city should ever have to seriously ask. What happens when the primary water source drops below operational thresholds? Sources inside Arizona's Department of Water Resources describe growing alarm at the conclusions emerging from those simulations. Those conclusions are not being shared publicly. Ask yourself this: if those numbers were reassuring, would they still be secret? The dam is still standing. But for how long? Here is something most people watching Hoover Dam footage fundamentally misunderstand. The dam's most critical function is not holding water. It is generating electricity. Hoover Dam's 17 hydroelectric generating units produce enough power for approximately 1.3 million average American homes. That power flows into grids serving Nevada, Arizona, and California. It keeps hospitals running. It operates water treatment plants. It lights communities that have no immediate alternative generating source capable of replacing what Hoover Dam provides. Those generators require water pressure. As the lake surface drops, the pressure driving water through the dam's penstocks and turbines decreases. Less pressure means less generating capacity, and the relationship is not linear. It accelerates as the lake falls. At the elevation recorded on March 3, 2026, the dam is generating at a fraction of its designed output. Dr. Kevin Walsh, a civil engineer who spent 14 years working for the Bureau of Reclamation before moving to the University of Arizona, reviewed the March 3rd footage and said something publicly that he would not have said 5 years ago. We are now within a realistic scenario window for dead pool conditions within this decade. Dead pool. 2 words that are appearing in more official documents and scientific papers with every passing quarter. Dead pool means the water level drops below the lowest intake elevation. The dam cannot release water downstream at all. The generators stop. The downstream flow that 7 states legally depend on simply ceases. The margin between where that lake sits today and where those turbines go permanently dark is 167 feet. And every new footage update from those canyon Walls confirms the trajectory is still heading the wrong direction. What's coming next, and why the numbers are merciless? In late February 2026, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration released its spring snowpack projections for the upper Colorado River Basin. The numbers sent water managers across the Southwest reaching for contingency files they hoped they would never need to open. Snowpack as of February 28, 2026. 62% of the long-term average across the critical headwater zones of Wyoming and northern Colorado. Winter precipitation deficits across the basin, 41% below normal for the period from October through February. The forecast for the remainder of the winter offers no signal of a pattern shift that could reverse the deficit before the spring melt window closes. Translation: the spring of 2026 will deliver less runoff than last year. Lake Mead will likely end the 2026 water year at a lower elevation than it started. The Bureau of Reclamation is currently modeling 4 operational scenarios for the Colorado River system through 2030. 3 of those 4 scenarios project Lake Mead dropping below 1,000 feet of elevation within 36 months. The 4th scenario, labeled optimistic in internal documentation, requires 3 consecutive above-average snowpack years beginning immediately. The last time the Colorado River Basin recorded 3 consecutive above-average snowpack years was between 2000 and 2003. That was 23 years ago. The arithmetic is not complicated, and the arithmetic is merciless. The century-long mistake that made this inevitable. The story of Lake Mead's collapse does not begin in 2026. It begins in 1922 on the banks of the Colorado River in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where representatives of 7 western states gathered to divide a river they believed was inexhaustible. The Colorado River Compact of 1922 allocated the river based on flow measurements taken during an unusually wet period in the early 20th century. Data that paleoclimate research and tree ring studies now confirm were anomalous. The flows measured between 1900 and 1920 represent some of the wettest years the basin had experienced in over 400 years. 7 states divided a river at its historic high water mark and assumed that number was normal. It was never normal. Everything that followed, the dam, the cities, the farms, the 40 million people, was built on a single catastrophic miscalculation that nobody in power wanted to correct when correction was still manageable. And now the current ongoing megadrought, documented by NASA and the U.S. Geological Survey as the driest 23-year span in at least 1,200 years, is delivering the final verdict on that decision. Outro. The footage from Hoover Dam does not show a natural disaster in the traditional sense. There was no earthquake, no hurricane, no single catastrophic event. What it shows is the accumulated consequence of a century of decisions made by people who assumed the future would look exactly like the past, who built cities and deserts on the promise of a river that could not keep that promise forever, who signed compacts and issued water rights and approved development permits again and again and again. While the snowpack declined, the temperatures climbed, and the lake quietly dropped 1 foot at a time. The Colorado River no longer reaches the Gulf of California. It hasn't reached the sea consistently since the 1990s. It simply runs out, disappearing into agricultural fields and municipal pipes, and evaporation and deficit long before it arrives where it was always supposed to go. That white scar on the canyon wall at Hoover Dam is the most honest measurement in the American West. It says, "This is what you used. This is what you took. This is what did not come back." The lake is still there. The dam still stands. The water still flows. For now. But 140 feet of empty air above a falling waterline is telling anyone willing to look exactly where this ends. If this video changed how you see the water crisis, share it with someone who needs to watch it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to go deeper on what solutions actually exist and whether any of them can work in time, that video is coming next.